Hello folks, you know what time it is? It's train time. So here's a cool little video that a lot of people have actually asked me about, both friends and model railroaders alike. And that is, how many Marx wind-up locomotives do I have in my collection? Well, in total, I have 10 locomotives counted up, and I'm going to take you through each of them. Some might have longer explanations than others, but yeah. So let's get started. So all the way, and this is on my right-hand side, I have the oldest of the clockwork locomotives, the 897, and this one I believe was built in the mid-30s. It's closer to at least 1934, 35-ish. It does not have its original tender, albeit that's the type it's supposed to have. It still has its sparking bar, but I need to replace the flint in it because it's just about worn completely out. And it works. One thing you got to remember in all my engines is that they all work. If I have a locomotive that doesn't work at all, I don't keep it. I either get it fixed, or if I can't, I'll sell it or replace it, but I never keep an engine that doesn't work. But yeah, this is a lithographed 897. Runs pretty well, albeit it's kind of weak in haulage capacity, but that's kind of expected for some of these trains. And now, as of course, I've got an 898 unpowered. It's a mechanical one. It has a different smokestack. It's supposed to have this type of smokestack with it, but the one that I got off of it was from a British locomotive, because the original smokestack just fell and broke off, so I put it on there. But this one does work as well. It's the mechanical 898. The electric versions actually have two little marker lights up here and a lamp at the front. I painted mine to be a 896. This was actually one of the first clockwork locomotives I ever received from my good friend Taylor Kennedy, so shout out to him. And of course I did find the correct tender that went with it, so yeah. Now onto the 595 type engine. This is the mechanical version. This is the only clockwork locomotive that I only have one of. Most of the time I get them in pairs of 3s or 2s. This is the only one that I have that is a single one. The other one that I have of this locomotive, because I do have two types, the other one is the electric version. Now this one did not look like this. It was heavily altered when I got it. I repainted it because it came with a Union Pacific tender, and I actually have footage of this engine running before it was repainted. I ran it with the Lionel Modular Group, I believe back in either 2017 or 2016. I think it may have been 2017. But yeah, I ran it at the Plano train show with them after one of their main lines shut down randomly. The wiring was a little bit snaggy that day, so I said, hey, I've got this clockwork engine. It doesn't require batteries or anything. I can just wind it up and put out there. And so whenever a train was being switched, or if there was just no trains on that line, they would have me run number 18 around. And of course I gave it that number originally. However, for some reason, I don't know why, but I painted 17 on the head marker. I've never actually went and painted it back out. I just kind of left it there as a joke that, the engine got promoted apparently. It also did not have side rods. Those were installed later on. So yeah. Pretty cool though, and this was probably the best engine that I ever ran at a show, considering there was tons of people that kept on wondering how it worked, and they were pleasantly surprised when they would see me pick it up, put a key in it, and wind it back up. They thought it was electric. So yeah. And now, on to my two Commodore Vanderbilts. The first one that I got is the one here, and this is the later model. I got it from a good friend of mine. His name is Blank. I'm not kidding, that's his actual name. But he sells Marx stuff, and this was one of the clockwork engines that I got from him. I actually got the 897 from him as well. I got them both at the same time. The tender it has is not its original tender. It's the only one that I had that would match it. And this engine does work, but just narrowly. It has a problem with the spring. The actual catching mechanism, the ratchet gear joint, basically, I don't know either if it's if it's broken or if it just doesn't catch, but if you wind it even 6 times, because usually these things can be wound about maybe 8 or 9.5 times before you encounter the resistance and you can't wind it. But if I even wind this thing 4 times and set it off, when it goes, the spring basically, it strips and it goes and it springs back out and it makes it jump off the track. I've already had one clockwork engine. The very first one I ever had was actually a Hornby clockwork engine, and I had that same problem, and one day it stripped real bad and it basically knocked out a gear and I was never able to get it working again. So I'm planning on getting the motor replaced on this one because it's pretty easy, or just have the motor be fixed. I keep on wanting to take it back to him, but I always forget to bring it. But yeah. But I got this engine, I believe, for around $20, and the other engine was for free. And now onto this one. This is the earlier version of the Commodore Vanderbilt, and I actually found this on eBay for about $8, and the tender for $2, and they were in really rough condition. Basically, I had to pull off all the wheels on this engine. I had to pull all the wheels off and epoxy them back on so that they would actually stick, because the axle would be spinning, but the wheels wouldn't be. They'd just stick in place. I also added side rods onto it. And the body was painted black just like the other one, but it was way more rusty, so I took a wire brush to it, scraped off every last bit of paint, and redid it. You can actually see some of the original paint underneath it just a little bit. And all that. And also, the governor in it, which is this little thing, basically it dictates the speed on it. It broke, and I had to take it out. So basically, I completely by accident created the world's fastest clockwork locomotive. This thing travels so fast. I mean, it's uncontested right now because I haven't exactly tested it foolproof, but this thing will not stay on a layout. Even with cars behind it, it will fly off at a curve. So, yeah. And the tender that came with it, I installed only one coupling on it because I only have one. I need to get some more spare parts. It was actually used to be painted green and gold, but I repainted that because it looked terrible. I did a terrible job on it, so I went and repainted it red. So yeah, and I also painted the other bits on it gold and copper, so it looked a lot nicer, and it was my Christmas train for that year. Alrighty, and now onto the engines that I have the most of. These are technically called 301 type locomotives, according to Northview Model Railroader, one of the few Marx experts that's on YouTube. I would say he's of the likes of Gary Anderson and the Greenberg Guide to Marx Trains, that type of knowledge he's got plenty of, and he works solely with clockwork engines. But of course the first one of these that I got was this one right here, number 3177, and the paint scheme that you can see on it was inspired by the Central Pacific Jupiter. I also had installed traction tires on this engine so it can haul a lot more and go a lot faster, and all that. It was one of the first eBay purchases I ever made, so props to that. And it did not originally have the 3177 number on it. As it turns out, I looked underneath the engine and the tender, and it had this little tag, which I have since taken off, which says restored by, I think, Rob Rosano, something like that. Something from a model railroad group, obviously, because the tender, as you can see, the coal has gray marks around it, which you usually don't see on these type of tenders. Even if it is gray, it's usually a lot cleaner than that. So it was repainted at some point. But the engine originally was gray, as it's gray on the inside, but the gray on the inside is a slightly lighter shade, most likely due to sun fade. And then, of course, we have this one. This is number 719, because before I knew these were called 301s, I nicknamed them the 700 class, because they were made in the 1970s strictly. So I just named them 700 after that. So anyway, let me show you this one. This one has its paint scheme based off of the Jupiter, or not Jupiter, but the 119. As you can see, it's red. And the tender actually has gold and green lining on it. Can't really see it very well. This one had a bit of a faulty motor, albeit it was probably in the best condition. and I bought it from a nice guy. His name is Bob. He goes to the Plano Train Show. He sells stuff with a friend of his. Very nice people, very nice people. I would suggest buying stuff from them, but he happened to have a few Marx sets, and he asked if I was interested, and he could never get anyone to buy them. I was the only person who ever actually went and bought them from him. So we've been firm friends ever since. So yeah, pretty cool. And now on to one of my favorites. This is number 710. And 710 probably has the most awkward backstory, I would say, out of all the engines, because back when I worked with the Lone Star High Railers, I completely misinterpreted a message from the at-time club president. We'll just call him Jay for short, because I'm not going to say what his actual name is, because that would just be mean. But Jay basically told me that if I wanted to do stuff with the locomotives on the layout, that I would need to bring a piece in to prove. So I grabbed one of the 440s they had on the layout, which I don't think they even use anymore. But it was a general type locomotive, and it was part of the Lincoln Logs train set. Basically, they just used it as a passenger engine. And it had marks all over it. It was nicked here and there. The coupling was broken on it, and one of the rods was missing. So I replaced all of the missing pieces, and I painted out all the scratches, and I added extra detail to it. And when I gave it back to them, they got pretty mad that I messed with some of their equipment, even though I wasn't meaning to. I guess you could say I wasn't being deliberate. I wasn't trying to screw with it. I was just fixing it so that it could be used properly. But as we were in the middle of talking about this at the club, which is this massive train car, no joke, they have their layout inside of a railroad car, which is incredibly amazing. I would suggest you go and visit them. Their layout's absolutely amazing. But regardless, though, when we were talking outside on the steps, and this gentleman pulls up in his car, and he has a box full of stuff, and he even has a pinball machine that's been dismantled in his trunk. And he shows us this box saying, "Hey, I know you're a model railroad group. Could you take a look at some of my trains?" And of course, he had mostly S-gauge trains, and he had a Lionel switch engine. It's a little diesel switcher, a 240. And he had this. It was a Marx. It was one of the 301s, but the cab was missing. Basically, this entire back section was gone. The funnel was broken off, and it had a massive split going down the smoke box. The front light was also broken off, and the cowcatcher at the front was just in pieces. Basically, imagine this cowcatcher, but way more dense and a little bit less left. And of course, I made the offer that I would buy the locomotive off of him. And of course, he had a Lehigh Valley car. He had a green one. It was a green, I guess you could say it was almost like a truck, but it was more like a open gondola car. And it was tin plate. It was in really, really rough shape. It was just terrible looking. I offered him $10 for the locomotive and $5 for the car, and of course he said, "I'll give you $10 for the whole thing." And so I took the engine home after that meeting, and I gave it this diamond stack. I completely repainted it, and also I got rid of the rest of what was left up here and repainted it. I also gave it a cab interior, fully painted with gauges, dials, a firebox, and boiler back head. You can't really see it very well, but it is there. And of course, I gave the tender I gave it a different tender. I gave it one of the plastic ones, but I cut the top of it off, and I repainted the whole thing, and it looked a lot better afterwards. And I gave it a new motor because the original wind-up motor in it was just destroyed, so I ripped up one of my other engines that was in way worse condition that I had as a spare, and I took the motor out of it and put it in this one. And also, the front of the engine, because it had lost so much stuff, it actually wasn't weighed down, so the engine would have a tendency to pop a wheelie. So what I did is I added this dummy wheel at the front and added a weight inside the front of the smoke box, and now it runs pretty smoothly. And I'm planning on giving it a proper cowcatcher too. So that way it really looks the part of being like a Western-styled engine. It used to have a bell, but that broke off, so I just painted that little bit gold. I'm probably going to add a proper safety valve or whistle there and add a bell at the front like they usually have. But the diamond stack was probably the best touch in my opinion. It was really amazing. Now on to this one. I actually forgot. I think I did actually renumber this one as 301 specifically. But this engine is the only clockwork locomotive that I have in my model railroad club, the Midwest and Central. As you can see, it has a tender. This was actually taken off of the Marx engine we currently have. It's our heavy freight engine, and it's been given a large Lionel tender with an extra weight added in it for better stability. And of course, since this tender is completely plastic, it's got a plastic chassis, plastic base, and everything. It's extremely light and perfect for this engine to pull. Now this engine, this 301, used to be my fireless steam engine custom. It did not have a smokestack, and the cab was sealed off at one end. And in fact, I was going to install a coupling over here, but I'm still gonna do that. A Marx tab and slot one, hopefully, and I'm going to add some steps right here so it looks more like a shunting engine. But I added back a smokestack. As you can see, here's the plate where the stack originally used to stand. It was a different one. This one's smaller. And there actually used to be a cab, full-on cab, right here, but that's been removed. And as you can see, the cab here, it used to have a roof overhang, but that was cut off, and of course it was flush back here, but now it isn't. Oops. Oh, there it goes. But yeah, as you can see, it's got a pretty empty cab, but I am going to fill it in more. If I could get that back on there. But yeah, it is definitely one of my more favorites. It also has, it doesn't have traction tires on it like some of the other engines do. Only I think 3 of these have traction tires. That's because they're regular runners. This one is not a regular engine. This engine would most likely just be relegated to shunting duties. Specifically, if there was a car at the stray end of the layout that needed to be brought over, just power this little thing up, just flick the switch, have it shunt the car down, and as it approaches, flick the switch off and grab the car, and then just turn the engine around and flick it the other way. So yeah, pretty versatile shunting engine if I do say so, even if you can't really control it per se. And of course, on to the last 301. I think I called this one maybe 714 or 713, I forget. But this is my only camelback styled locomotive, and I've actually been trying to get it to be changed to New Jersey Central, but I still have the word York on there. I'm still trying to figure out what font that is so I can replace it, because the New Jersey Central had these type of engines. And I still need to add the massive air tanks at the top. But yeah, I've actually got the bell in the right place though. Pretty funny. But yeah, I actually do believe I still have a video of this engine's construction up. This entire back section is made from tin. Tin roofing material, actually. I basically found some in my shop, and I just went and cut some of it into pieces and shaped it, and I super glued the whole thing. And it's held up pretty well. I would have epoxied it, but I was really low on epoxy back then, so I just super glued everything, and of course I cut and sanded the cab and everything. And it works. I just need to get in there with a little lever and push that back so that way it can start. But it does work, and it does have a proper tender, and it actually came in a full set. So it's one of the few that actually came in a set. And it's probably one of my favorites, albeit I don't use it too much. But it definitely gets attention when I run it around on other people's layouts. It definitely is an attention getter just to how unique it is. Kind of like the Western styled 710. So, yeah. I hope you all enjoyed this nice little video showing off all of my clockwork Marx engines. Maybe in future I might show off all the motorized ones as well. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.